What's up, guys? Welcome to Daily Dose of Reddit. This is your host, Zach, and today's subreddit is r/EntitledParents. This story's called, "My entitled grandmother stole my new clothes and exchanged them for steel utensils, so I gave away her utensils." I'm Indian, and in my country, till a few years ago, you could get steel utensils from door-to-door vendors in exchange for clothes. This barter system still exists in villages in some small towns. My grandmother, being the insane hoarder that she was, loved getting utensils in this manner. Utensils that no one else was allowed to touch, that she would never use and would only gather dust in her room. Anytime my stepmom or my dad tried to donate our clothes to charity, that cooter would throw a hissy fit. She'd collect all the clothes we weren't going to wear anymore so she could exchange them for pots and pans. At times, she would take it a step further and demand clothes that we were still going to wear. She would insist that they don't fit us anymore or some other BS argument to get us to hand them over. Seriously, we would sometimes have to fight her to keep our clothes. Oh, but she never gave away her own clothes. She only took garments from others, namely me, my dad, my stepmom, and my stepbrother. When I was around 21, I had just lost a lot of weight and needed new clothes. Yes, I lived with my parents. In India, you can't afford to live independently unless you have a well-paying job, and I was in college at that time. So one day, I went to a local store's clearance sale and bought a bunch of new threads. I left them on my bed and went off to a friend's place. When I returned home a few hours later, my new clothes were gone. My dad, stepmom, and brother weren't home, so I figured out instantly who must have taken them. I confronted the grand monster and asked what she'd done with my clothes. She was sitting on her bed admiring her latest haul of pots and pans. Without even looking up, she told me my clothes were ugly and too westernized, and that she did the right thing by exchanging them for something useful. As you can imagine, I lost my temper. I yelled, cursed at her, called her every name in the book, and she had the audacity to actually defend her actions. That evening, there was a major showdown in our home. I was still livid and asked my dad exactly how long we were going to put up with her abuse. My stepmother and I don't get along, but when one of us was up against Grand Monster, the other always lent her support. This was no different. My stepmother agreed with me wholeheartedly. My dad told Grand Monster that she was now forbidden from entering my room without my prior permission. She started to fake cry and said we were all being so cruel to her. My dad later came to my room and said he would make it up to me and buy me new clothes. I, of course, was still livid, and I wasn't about to let that cooter have this victory. My grandmother needed sleeping pills to fall asleep. She took them even during the day, and she slept like the dead. A few days later, I snuck into her room during her afternoon nap. I opened her utensils trunk. Yes, she had a whole trunk full of them, and took out a whole bunch of her beloved pots, glasses, plates, etc. I shut the lid quietly and exited. I went straight to an old age shelter that was nearby. I donated the utensils and earned the joy of giving and the taste of sweet revenge. I didn't tell anyone what I had done and just waited for Grand Monster to discover her loss, which she did, just a few days later. It happened in the evening. I was in the kitchen cooking dinner when I heard her ear-piercing wailings about how someone had stolen from her utensils chest. A satisfied smile spread across my face. My dad called me into grandmother's room and asked if I knew anything about the missing utensils. I admitted that I had taken and donated them. Grand Monster looked like her head would explode. I calmly told her that I had done the right thing because those utensils were ugly and that the shelter needed them more. And clearly, if she could come into my room and take my things without asking, I could jolly well do the same. I think my dad was upset with me, but really had nothing to say to me. He spent the next hour or so trying to calm his mother down. I slept so freaking well that night. When Grand Monster died a few years later, The first of her belongings that we got rid of were those freaking utensils. Wow, I guess the old lady was nasty all the way to her grave. Yeah, that sounds very annoying and just insanely frustrating to have to deal with. However, this family obviously is, or at least I feel like is a very modern family in terms of families in India and Pakistan and, that region in general. Because most people from there would never yell and scream at their grandmother. That is a big no-no. No matter how stupid they're being, no matter how much of a jerk they are, and they probably are one, you can't do that. I'm not even exaggerating right now, because based off of my experience and what I've seen and what I know, you will get your ass beat if you talk to anyone older than you like that, especially if they're your grandmother or parents. This story's called Entitled Mom Demands I Buy Her and Her Kids Food. Just putting this out there that if I knew beforehand that this entire thing would happen, I'd still let it happen. There's a local burger place in my area that I visit regularly. It's normally empty during the week, but on this day, for whatever reason, there were a few more people in there than normal. I was with a close friend. We'll call him Carlos. I just wanted to hang out with him and get some food. We're standing in the line and talking for about 2 minutes when entitled mother and her 2 boys, I guess they were younger than 10, walk up behind us. One kid starts fussing and whining that he's hungry, and this seemingly triggers the other kid to do the same. Carlos and I just shrug it off and eventually get up the front of the line and we order our food. Carlos ordered before me, but I let the cashier know that I'd be paying for both mine and his meal. That was a mistake. Before I even get my wallet out, entitled mother shoves me out of the way and says, "I'd like to add to his order," and proceeds to order over $40 worth of food for her and her 2 kids. I asked her what she thought she was doing, and she said, "I saw you pay for that guy, Carlos, so I'm sure you wouldn't mind buying food for a single mother and her 2 children." Normally, I would have considered that if she, asked first, but who in their right mind thinks it's okay to do what she just did? I told her that I won't be paying for any of her food and that she's setting a bad example for her kids by trying to get free stuff from people. That comment pissed her off and she started getting all up in my face. I'm not sure if that was meant to intimidate me, but I'm 6'2" and that lady was no taller than 5'5". She raised her voice saying, "Don't you dare tell me how to parent my kids. You have no idea what it's like being a single mom and raising 2 boys on your own." I retort saying, "Yeah, you're right. I don't know what that's like. But I wasn't the one who told you to get knocked up twice. So I really don't want to hear your single mom excuse for being an a-hole." I made sure not to say the full word in front of her kids and any other kids in the restaurant, but after that comment, she didn't care.
"Who the frick do you think you are, talking to me like that?"
The guy who up to 2 minutes ago, you had no problem trying to spend his money?
"I work 2 frickin' jobs to provide for my kids, and you think it's okay to stand here and disrespect me?"
You disrespected me by cutting in front of me and assuming you'd get free food from me. I don't know what world you're living in, but you need to come back to Earth.
"Me and my children are hungry and you can't even be nice and help us out?"
You literally ordered $40 worth of food for yourself and 2 kids at possibly the cheapest place in town? That isn't just helping out, and you and your kids being hungry still doesn't make you entitled to free food. You pay just like everyone else in here. Entitled mother stopped shouting, "I don't have any money. How would you feel if you were in my situation?" Listen, lady, you're not getting free food off of me. If you just asked, I would have been more inclined to be nice and help you, but you clearly think that being a single mom with 2 kids is supposed to make everyone around you do whatever you say, and the world doesn't work that way. So pay for your own food and stop wasting my time. Entitled mother just looked at me angrily and didn't answer. At this point, everyone in the restaurant is looking and listening to the conversation. My buddy Carlos is about ready to deck the lady, and the people behind us in line are clearly unhappy. I tell the cashier to remove whatever she ordered and I pay for my food. I thought that would be the end of it, but boy was I wrong. Entitled mother orders her food again after, and angrily forks over the money she clearly had and pays for her food. Carlos looks at me and asks, "What the frick just happened?" To which I respond, "Your guess is as good as mine, bro." We get our food and are about to leave when entitled mother shouts,
"Those two guys harassed me!"
and we turn to see the manager of the restaurant. She goes on to say that I inappropriately touched her in the restaurant in front of her two babies, and she wanted the cops called on me immediately. The lady clearly forgot that the entire store witnessed the entire thing, and no one was having it any longer. I didn't need to say much to defend myself to him before the entirety of the store started shouting and screaming at her for holding up the line and falsely accusing me of molesting her. I'm pretty sure the lady felt like she would have been punched in the face at any second because, without collecting her food, she took her two kids and ran out of the store. Carlos and I looked at each other and started dying of laughter, and a few other people did as well. We apologized to the manager and everyone else for the inconvenience and left the store. We haven't stopped laughing about it since then. When are people gonna learn that a lot of people might help you out if you ask, instead of kind of forcing it upon them, or at least attempting to force it upon them? This story's called Younger Cousin and his entitled dad expected me to give him a brand new Apple laptop. This was originally posted on Choosing Beggars, and a few people suggested I repost it here too, so here it is. Over the years, I noticed that the worst culprit for choosing beggars are usually family members, especially the random ones who are sort of related to you, but deep down, you don't really know each other all that well. This incident actually occurred quite a long time ago, over 10 years ago, and I had almost forgotten about it until someone reminded me about it last weekend. Way back over 10 years ago, I just got a new promotion to a new role and I bought some new tools, including a new Apple MacBook for work. I was living in London at the time and was in a small flat/apartment, which means space was premium. So I decided that I should get rid of some of the stuff in the house. One of those was a PC that was a few years old at the time. Back then, my grandma used to call me up every few days just to chat about stuff. And I mentioned to her about the promotion and the new stuff I bought and the old stuff I'm giving away. And being an old lady whose hobby was basically phone calls to the family, she passed this news on to a few relatives. One of my aunts heard the news and told her younger kid. A few days later, my aunt and her kid called me up and said that they will take my computer. Great! Come over to my place and collect them. They drove over the next day and then turned into a long argument with me once they arrived. For some reason, probably due to the fact that my grandma doesn't really know about computers and stuff, or my aunt misheard it, or whatever, they thought they were picking up my brand new MacBook instead of a few years old desktop. My aunt, being an adult, at least understood that it must be a miscommunication. My little cousin, though, was throwing a huge tantrum over it in my house. He kept on going on about how crap the spec of the machine is and how it would be useless to him. And bear in mind, he wasn't like 8 years old at the time, he was 13 years old. But that should be an age where he should understand that his distant cousin, me, is not gonna randomly give him a brand new computer just for homework. My aunt was trying to just get the computer out of my place, and I just wanted to get them and the computer out of my place, and my girlfriend just wanted all the crying noises to stop so she could focus on her work. Yep, 13-year-old boy crying was quite a scene. At the end, they just left, empty-handed of course, since the kid doesn't want the old PC, and I wasn't ready to give him my new one. I thought that was that, but then, later that night, my uncle, my cousin's entitled dad, called me up and demanded an explanation of why I backed out on a deal. And that was not the way to treat family, etc., etc. The phone call ended up with me hanging up on him, which led to a lecture from my grandma the next day over the phone and took me an hour to explain what happened. And that led to a lecture from her to my uncle, which led to more phone calls and arguments. My uncle complained that now his son has no computer to use, and I told him he can still pick up my computer, which was still sitting in my house at the time. I didn't get an answer until 2 days later, and he sent me a list of things he wants me to upgrade on the computer that I am planning to give away with my own money. Obviously, I just ignored them at that time, and good thing my family always has a lot of drama. Probably stirred up by my very bored grandma, come to think of it. So very soon, everyone was on to the new storyline to follow. And what happened to the computer? I ended up giving it to a neighbor of the same floor, who I talked to a few times. They were in a less fortunate position than us, and their 2 teenage children at the time used to use the computers at school and the library for their homework. Once my girlfriend found out about that, it was a natural place to send my computer to. At first, they refused it because they couldn't give me money for it. But we were not looking to take any money anyway because A, it wasn't worth all that much anyway, and B, it was much easier to bring the damn thing just across a few doors than anywhere else. They were our neighbors for a few more years before I moved away from the block. I didn't think about it much anymore until recently when I was contacted by the older of the 2 children. Apparently, he has just graduated from university and just started a job. We talked about a few things and he thanked me again for giving him the computer all those years ago. Apparently, it's still being used by their parents at their home. It's funny how things can turn out sometimes. Pretty sure my cousin has still not forgiven me for not giving him a MacBook though. Okay, all brattiness and entitledness aside, this was a sweet little story. It's always fascinating how such a supposedly small gesture can so greatly affect the life of another person. For instance, if Jeff Bezos gave 0.01% of his net worth, which is estimated to be like $100 billion, that's like $10 million. Now, $10 million isn't much to old Jeffy boy here, but to like almost everyone else on the planet, that is a life-changing amount of money. So, perspective. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to never miss an episode.